Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today's demo of Armor Anywhere with Cloud Security Posture Management. I'm Mona Thaker, your host for today's broadcast. Before we start, I'd like to go over some webinar housekeeping tips. Everyone is currently on mute and will remain so throughout the recording. Please use the chat window to inform us of any audio or technical issues. If you experience sound issues, we recommend calling in via phone instead of using your computer's audio. Throughout the demo, please use the question feature to ask about any of the topics being discussed. And lastly, today's demo is being recorded and a link to an edited version will be sent to all attendees post-event. With us today, we have Armor's Vice President of Engineering, Robert Rea. Robert, can you tell our audience more about your role at Armor, please?
Yeah, so I run the engineering organization at Armor. We build out Armor Anywhere, Armor with secure hosting, and now this latest product, Cloud Security Posture Management.
Awesome, thank you, Robert. So before we dive into the actual demo, let me walk you guys through a little bit about what the feature is, what the key benefits of the features are. So Armor's Cloud Security Posture Management feature, it helps you query, monitor, and assess the public cloud assets in the AWS, Azure, and GCP environment. So you can identify security risk and misconfigurations against major security and compliance frameworks. So this has huge benefits, especially for the security and GRC leaders. You're able to regularly go and monitor the security posture within the portal. You're able to reduce and manage accidental risk, and you're able to adhere to security and compliance mandate easily and effectively. The way it really works is a three-step process: discover, detect, and remediate. In the discover phase, you're able to generate on-demand reports and gain visibility into the cloud assets. In turn, that map the cloud assets to compliance controls. And then when you do the detection, you're able to identify cloud misconfigurations against the security and compliance frameworks. And finally, when you follow the step-by-step instructions, you're able to remediate those misconfigurations. So that's how it works in a nutshell. And Robert will walk you through detailed steps in the demo. Tying it back to Armor Anywhere's holistic value proposition, when you have Armor Anywhere agents as well as CSPM capabilities enabled, you're able to protect against intentional and accidental risk altogether within one solution and one user interface. So with that, I'll turn it over to Robert for a detailed demo of CSPM.
Great, thanks, Mona. All right, I'm going to minimize that reports. Let me jump over to AMP, which I did get logged out from. So let me log back in for you guys. Oops, I knew this would happen since I was the one sharing. I'm going to MFA real quick. And then we'll pop in here and see a couple things. While that's loading, let me jump over to our documentation real quick. Kind of show you a couple things. One is if you go to docs.armor.com and you, let me log in while that's popping up. Signed out. If you go to docs.armor.com, you can read more about cloud security posture management there. It gives you a couple things. First, there's a quick intro on there that's fantastic. If you just want a quick recap after this whole demo and you're like, well, what was it again? I had some questions. I didn't know what this meant. Being able to dive into it from there. Also gives you a couple things related to the sign-up process. So those of you that are maybe new to Armor, you already have an account with Armor, this gives you that step-by-step instructions as to what you need to do to just get started. So we've got a really quick, how do I get this going process once we get into it. And then just a quick overview we'll dive into. Here's that quick video I was showing you about, but wanted to make sure that I left you all with a quick intro as to once we dive into this, how do I come back? How do I get more information from Armor? And what does all this mean? Because I think some of it may be new to all of you as cloud security posture management, and using some of those sorts of terms. So I wanted to run through and talk about how do we view that? How do we think about cloud security posture management, or what does that mean? For me, I think the easiest way that I view it is if you're ever, maybe it's just because I'm in security and compliance, but when I walk away from my car, I hit the little lock button, locks it. I hit the second time, and I get that little audible alert, right, where it beeps, and it's like, hey, your doors are locked. And I'm like, cool, I'm good. I'm gonna go do what I need to do, my shopping, whatever. If you're even more like me and you're going on a business trip back when we used to do that, I keep doing that until I was so far away that it just stopped working. So how does that relate to cloud security posture management? Well, that's what it's doing, is that second click you do is doing that analysis of, are my doors locked? And then I'm gonna give you assurance that it's locked, which is that audible signature. And that's what this is this is giving you that assurance that those controls or those locks are in place for you. So let me jump to AMP real quick and switch to my demo account. And I'll show you kind of the splash screen. So when I showed you how to sign up, we do a couple things here. First thing is just a quick overview of it. And it's gonna talk through what cloud security posture management is, talk through these different areas around how do you assess security and compliance, gain visibility, identify and remediate risks. And then it's really easy to get started from there. You click on new connector. It works for AWS, GCP, or Azure. From here, we generate a unique external ID. And then we walk you through, if you need steps on how to do this, we just need read-only access into your public cloud account. And it will assess from there, start to bring down all the resources. So do that assessment against your environment and understanding, what needs to go into place there. So very easy setup. You can do it for any number of public cloud accounts you have, all within the single AMP account, which is great. So let me jump over to where I've actually set this up now. And we'll look at some of this. While that switches, did I switch it? Yeah. Let's do this to go and show you a couple things on this is our cloud connectors. So I wanted to walk through that top piece of how do you set it up. Very simple steps for AWS, for GCP, and then for Azure. But wanted to highlight for you a couple things. I know some people get a little nervous around, oh, I don't want to give you access to my public cloud account. I don't know what you're going to do in there. All of these roles that we're asking for are just read-only. So we don't come in and need any other permissions outside of that to assess the environment, which makes it a little easier if you're getting into those GRC conversations, that sort of thing, as to making sure that this new compliance piece that you're going to leverage is just a read-only into your environment. When you're setting that up, and once you've set it up to your cloud accounts, we've got a couple things when you click on it. First, when you first land on it, it gives you all your reports. We'll dive into this in a second. This is one of my favorite parts. But when you set up a new connector, this is that page that's going to give you that readout as to what you've done. So I've got a couple here wired up to AWS, Azure, and GCP. All it's really doing is showing me my state. So I'm on, configured, ready to go. When I last refresh that connection status, and then I can do a couple things of just if I need to refresh it, view details, delete it, that sort of thing. Before we dive into some of the reports, I wanted to talk about the policy pieces. Because once you've wired it up, the real question is, what is it doing? Like, what happens next? How does that relate to your car analogy? And that is these policies. So these policies are basically a list of controls within them. Those controls are simply like that second click where it's checking, are all of the doors locked? That's what this is doing. This is saying, are these services in a good state for security, for compliance? Which is things like, am I sure that my access keys are unused for 9 days or greater disabled? It tells you what service that's related to, which criticality that is. What's important to this is that assurance piece is this. So if I asked you, if you're running production workloads in AWS right now, how many of you with assurance, if you're not leveraging a tool like this, could tell me that you have that set up in AWS, or that you have, I think on S3, a really good one was, do you have versioning enabled on your buckets? Do you have it so that you enforce transport encryption? Those sorts of things, or you can go figure it out yourself, right? You could go log into all your AWS accounts, check each bucket configuration, just like I could walk back to my car and I could check each handle. But that's not efficient. That doesn't give you that assurance. It's not automated. It's not easy to do every time. So that's what's great about this, is that anytime I rerun a report, I get that assurance that these states, these controls are in place, or they're not in place, and now I need to go remediate it. So we'll talk about that next. These policies are tied up against AWS, Azure, and GCP. The reason they're separate is that each public cloud is set up and they have different services, different configurations, different controls that need to be applied. So that's why they're separate and it's not all grouped as one. That takes into account when we go to build out a report. So let's go look at that next. When we're setting up a report, again, because each one has different services, different offerings, and different controls that we map into that, we set up a report per account, per cloud account, meaning if you use AWS, you can have as many AWS accounts checked in a single report. We just can't cross AWS between Google and Azure. What's great about that is if you're running 10, 20, 30 production AWS accounts, you can have a single report that tells you your state in that and gives you that assurance. I'm gonna talk about assurance. What does that mean? So you can tie up all of those controls. We map those to mandates. Now this is where it's really powerful because this is really what you're driving towards. You either are going against PCI DSS or ISO 27001. There is some mandate that you're working towards that you wanna check your accounts against. You may be CIS top 20, maybe NIST 800. So those are the sorts of things that you'll be able to pick in your reports and view that in detail. So maybe NIST cybersecurity framework. When you pick that, you can pick which connectors. Basically, that's what cloud account you're wired up to. Why is that important? Well, for me, I know I've got production AWS accounts, dev AWS accounts, staging ones. In that, I may want different reports for that. I may have a different group of people operating on certain accounts or certain environments. And so I want separate reports for that, which is really nice. Now let's get to the best part, which is really, what do these reports tell me? Because I think all of it, you're like, okay, that's all neat. But let's talk about the details of it. So first one we'll jump into is our ISO one. And at the top level, this is that quick assurance piece, right? This is that quick audible or visual feedback of what I've done. I said audible because of the little click thing, but visual feedback of how am I doing, right? Against ISO 27001, what state am I in? Well, I'm in a 47% good state and a 53% bad state. Well, that's, I guess, maybe good, depends on which environment this is. Depending if this is your first time you're running this and you know you have stuff to go do, or it's your production environment, and you're like, whoa, 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 that's super concerning. I don't think that should be that at all. So what do we do now? What's the next step? If I'm in DevOps, if I'm a manager, if I'm an engineer, like whatever your case may be, if you're in compliance and you need to hand this over to folks, the next step is very simple. Let's start fixing this. Let's get this in a better state. So if we start to drill down, I'm gonna go to some specific ones here. You can see a couple of cool things about this. One is this is wiring up to the mandate. So as I'm looking at this, I'm looking at it from the perspective of ISO 27001, requirement 6.2.2, right? Related to teleworking, remote access. And now we're getting to, okay, now here's those controls and how they mapped to this, which is super neat. And from here, I can see how am I passing or failing on that. So it's like, well, what are my next steps here? We give you a couple things of detail. One is it's a very specific control that we're listing here. We tell you whether it's high, medium, or low, which that may help drive some of your priorities related to it. Advanced query is going to jump you out to our data lake, which allows you to do a lot more advanced stuff, which I'm really not going to dive into on this one. And then remediation. This is that piece of, all right, let's start fixing these. Let's get this in a better state. And here, a couple of great things as we show you how to fix it. A lot of references to why is this important. How do we do this with the CLI or the console? As well as just a lot of details that tells you why this is important. What does this mean? And all of that to help really understand, you know, as a end user, what do I need to go do to feel good about the state as I've remediated these and all those actions and then the impact associated to it. Now, that's all great on how I do it. What pieces do I need to go fix? That's on the resources side. So this is going to show me which security groups I have that are passing this, meaning they don't allow 22 open to the world. And then those security groups that are failing that. So this security group allows port 22 open to the world. Where's my proof in that, right? Where's that evidence? Where's that, hey, my assurance that this is actually a bad state? Shows you right here. Here's my VPC ID, the value associated to it, and now it's showing my evidence of my setting, which is the network open to the world, 22 over TCP. So here, as I fix that, I can rerun this report and do that. So what would that next step be, right? If I'm doing it, if I'm handing it over to my DevOps folks, engineers, I'm going to change it in my Terraform script. What does that mean? Follow those remediation steps, change it in your infrastructure as code, change it through the CLI. It's running every 4 hours and assessing your environment. During that, after a 4-hour window, rerun your report. You'll see that that's fixed, and you can move on to the next one or do a bunch of them at that time. Let's look at a few other ones. So I wanted to dive into, because I know probably people had questions around, okay, well, let's talk about, I'm not in AWS, I'm in Azure. What does that mean? Let's go look at a few other reports just so you can kind of see that. And then we'll jump into a few other things. Next one I wanted was the NIST. And again, if you have questions as we're going through this, please put those in. I want to make sure I leave time for that at the end. Let's go into access control. I wanted to look at good one in here is related to, you hear stuff on the news about public S3 buckets, or you have things with public access to blob. So here you can see we're checking that in an Azure environment. You can see here that I'm passing, meaning I have no public access set to blob containers. If I click on remediation, still going to walk me through those steps, even though I don't have anything to do right now. But if I failed, it would tell me what to go remediate. And again, I love this in that it tells you a lot of good information around why is this important? Why do I need to go and make sure that this is in this state? Why is this control important to me? And why should I have my teams do that? So no matter which position you're in, it makes it easy to come and reference this. And not only why should I fix it, but then how to go fix it. And then the proof of either I fixed it or I'm not all right next to it. Last thing I wanted to show was our GCP one. On this one, let's dive into our firewall images, because I like our boundary protection. So if you see in here, again, that same concept, this one's for GCP. Again, that same check of what's my access to the world for RDP or SSH access, checking against it, showing me what are my remediation steps. Again, showing you that these work across any cloud that you've got it wired up to. And then again, those resources on how to go and fix that. So you can see in here, proof that it's open to the world. We need to go now fix this and then remediate it. And then we should be in a good spot. As you go through remediate it, what are my next steps? What are my other capabilities can I do in here? A couple things, exporting. So we've got a PDF export. If you're one of those groups that's trying to comply with PCI DSS, trying to make sure you have a report for HIPAA and high trust, what can you do? You can export this to show if you've got a really good state. Here's how I'm passing. Here's all the things that I've checked against all of the different parts of that mandate and how we're faring against that. So you can see in here, a lot of times rather than having to log into the AWS accounts and so screenshots and all of that, you've got your report right here to be able to show how I've got 100% pass on this. I'm good. Everything automated is checking against it. And here's how my team is operating against those things, which is fantastic. Same thing again, if you're looking at ISO, how does it map against it? You can see here all the details as far as no root access to the account. So just all of those areas, it's really hard to go and check inside of a cloud account, make sure it's configured, especially start adding more and more. This is really good for that. In Azure, it'll check against all the security controls. Same thing for AWS and for Azure. So NICE is one, is your initial assessment, gives you that assurance of, hey, I'm good or I'm not, steps to go remediate it. And then the last thing is that constant rerunning of that report. Come in and run it as often as you want as far as your compliance programs or your security program allows you to go and check against that. With that last one, I know because some people are like, well, what if I want to export it to Excel, run some additional analytics on it, send that to my other folks? We have that as well, a CSV export. Just quick, again, snapshot to show pass-fail percentages that you're able to then turn this over for people to then jump into Armor Management Portal, view how to go remediate it, view which resources to remediate, and you're off to the races. So with that, wanted to make sure we had time for questions. I had time to jump in anything extra that somebody might have questions on. So I don't know, Mona, if we had anything from
Yes,
folks on the call.
thank you so much for the detailed demo, Robert. Really appreciate that. We do have a number of questions, which I've answered some of them, but let's
Okay.
look through what's remaining. So there's one open question saying, are there any DLP capabilities or policy enforcement enabled?
We don't for DLP. No, this is really against your public cloud infrastructure and assessment against that as far as the configuration of your infrastructure and settings in that environment.
Awesome, thank you. A general question is around if Armor is managing their servers in AWS environment, if this feature is going to be available. So my initial response is that if you do have an AMP account, you're going to able to enable CSPM capabilities on your own. So anything to add, Robert, over there?
No, that's correct. If you've already got an AMP account with us, you've already an Armor customer, and you want to take advantage of this, once you click on compliance on your left-hand navigation, you'll be able to wire up your connector right away. Choose which cloud account you want to connect to. Follow these quick instructions as to what to set up from this side of your AWS Azure GCP account, just so we have access into it. And then you can start running as many reports as you want and being able to action upon that right then.
Awesome, thank you. The other question is around if this is available as a standalone service or if they have to add on this service to Armor products. So you are able to enable CSPM capabilities even without the Armor Anywhere agents. You do need an AMP account to enable that. However, I will say that the best value that you get out of Armor Anywhere product line is when you enable both the agents as well as CSPM capabilities because of the holistic value proposition that we have, the protection against intentional as well as accidental risks. So please do consider that factor when you're making your decisions as well. The other question is there an extra charge for this? Yes, there is an extra charge. We would recommend you working with the account manager and teams to kind of get some more details around that. One question is specific to the first part of the setup. Says, I missed the first part. What is the setup time for AWS?
Yeah, great question. So if you want to set it up, if you're brand new, there will be a new connector button that you can click. When you click AWS, it'll pop up a couple things. It's generating an external ID right now. You'll take these values and then you'll click on this, learn how to add a connector. For AWS, you're going to follow these 8 steps, which is just basically creating a role, giving us that shared access into that role after you've given us the security audit permissions, which is just the read-only permissions and that account. And at that point, take your role ARN, drop that in here, and then you're able to, at that point, we have access into the environment to just query and pull in all the resources across all of the regions that you're leveraging with AWS and provide that security assessment and compliance assessment on it.
Great, thank you, Robert. Aside from reports, is there a notification system for alerting?
No, right now we do it from reports for the mandates. We do have all this going into our data lake if you want to do any extra visualizations, queries on top of. But as far as like notifications to your email box or anything like that, we don't have that.
Awesome. The other questions are around, do you also score against PCI, GDPR fully?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
I guess it depends on what they mean by fully. So what we do is every control that we're able to map against related to public cloud infrastructure, we will map against that. Let me dive into one of those details because that's an interesting point. There are some areas, like if you look at high trust, GDPR, PCI, that are more around things that we actually can't do anything with. So there are a few, hold on, let me grab one. That's a good one. Being able to document and implement procedures. So there's things in some compliance frameworks that are show me all the roles and responsibilities of your different levels of engineers in your environment. That obviously doesn't even pertain to AWS or GCP or Azure. So that one we won't have any control on. It'll just show as a mark with 0. Also, if you're not using that feature, it'll show as a mark without it. So we'll show it, and that's still a part of the mandate, but nothing that ties up to the public cloud infrastructure.
Makes sense. Thank you. One question is around, does this scan the Windows machine for vulnerabilities also?
That's a good question. So as CSPM does not, Cloud Security Posture Management does not. That checks again against your AWS environment. So it'll tell you if you have EC2 instances and if those backups are being encrypted or not. The actual information and security and compliance around in-guest or in-host of that EC2 instance, that's where Armor Anywhere comes into play, which is an agent that you can easily install. Vulnerability scanning as a part of that. And from there, it will give you vulnerability readouts to be able to assess it. It also has file integrity monitoring, intrusion detection, any malware, logs are wired up for compliance as well to our data lake. So all of that comes in with Armor Anywhere when you're talking about inside the actual virtual machine instance.
Awesome. The last question I have in here populated is, how is this different from Prisma currently?
So Prisma is also a cloud security posture management offering. The difference here is that Armor's offering is that it's integrated into our product, single pane of glass across all of the public clouds, integrated into our data lake. What does that mean, integrated our data lake? So our data lake pulls in, like I said, all the things around your public cloud, also all your vulnerability data of that if you're leveraging Armor Anywhere, actual VM, all the logging data, all the security data. So you're able to build dashboards, reports, analytics across all of your levels of your infrastructure and your programs for compliance. Because compliance is not just how am I stacking against AWS, right? Compliance is, do I have my vulnerability patched for my VMs? Do I have file integrity monitoring running on my VMs? Do I have any malware running on that? All of that can be pulled from our data lake and from AMP itself. And so that's what's great about this versus Prisma, which just is the cloud security posture management, is this is fully integrated into data lake, AMP itself for all those other capabilities.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a really good point, Robert. And also to a little bit of on the pricing side as well, the way we implemented this capability is you can have one account with unlimited number of assets within that account. The way Prisma works is they have classified workloads and they're priced per workload. So that's another point to kind of keep in mind. With an integrated solution, you also benefit on that front as well. So that is the end of the question. Let me see if any other question pop up. But thank you so much, Robert. It was an excellent demo. Thank you for walking us through and giving us a tangible example with it too, with the security piece. So really appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. Again, when you're locking your car up and you hear that double beep, if you're like me, just ask yourself that same question. You know, do I feel as good about my cloud environment that I'm leveraging as I do that my doors are locked?
Awesome. So thank you for everyone for joining today. And please visit armor.com for details on, our audit-ready compliance and CSPM capabilities. We're going to have some of the resources available to you. You can download that from our handout section in this webinar. And we would also make that available to you via a follow-up email. So again, thanks everyone for joining.